Good morning. Thank you all for visiting with us again today. Welcome to Bible study with Andre and Betty. We're continuing our studies in the Gospel according to Mark in chapter 14. Today we'll be studying chapter 14 verses 32 through verse 72. And Jesus is still going on his way to Jerusalem to become our Passover lamb. And so this is the Passover celebration that we're still focusing on. And in verse 32, we'll begin to see the agony that Jesus experienced in the Garden of Gethsemane. So Mark chapter 14, verse 32 says, "And they came to a place which was named Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, 'Sit ye here while I shall pray.'" He didn't ask them to pray with him. He said for them to sit where they were and he would go. He was going to pray. And Gethsemane means oil press. That name means oil press. And it's speaking of the pressing of olives to make the oil like a wine press, stamping your feet on the olive oils for the oil to come out, or the grapes of the juice of the grapes to be mashed out. And so he's talking about the agony that he experienced is the reason he's got to go and pray. Verse 33, "And he taketh with him Peter and James and John, and began to be sore amazed and to be very heavy," meaning really sad and amazed at what's about to happen. And verse 34, "And saith unto them, My soul is exceeding sorrowful unto death. Tarry ye here and watch." And here I would ask you to read Hebrews chapter 5, verses 7 through 10. But I'm going to read a few of these words to help us understand what Jesus was feeling when he went to pray. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7 says, "Who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared. Though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him, called of God and high priest after the order of Melchizedek." And so he asked them to watch and pray, or to wait here until I come, while I go and pray, and watch and wait. The first prayer. And verse 35, "And he went forward a little and fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him." That is the hour of suffering that he was, from the beginning, knew that his purpose was to pay the sin debt of the whole world. But in this prayer, he's in agony, and he says in verse 36, "Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. So, God, I want to do your will, not my own will. And this is a prayer that we should all pray, whatever we're praying about. The safest place for us to be is in the will of the Father. Verse 37. And he cometh and findeth them sleeping. They were supposed to be watching and praying, but they're sleeping. And he saith unto Peter, Simon, sleepest thou? Couldst not thou watch 1 hour? So Peter had said that he would go with him all the way, and he thought in himself that he could, but while Jesus is praying, Peter and the others are sleeping. So he says again in verse 30, Jesus says again in verse 38, watch ye and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit truly is ready, but the flesh is weak. So our spirits can experience the rest and follow the leadership of the Holy Spirit, but the flesh, or our human flesh, is weak. So we may want to do something, but if we're trying to do it in our own strength, we're not going to make it. Now the second prayer, verse 39, and again he went away and prayed and spake the same words. And when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. Neither knew wist they what to answer him. They couldn't find the words to answer him. The third prayer, and he cometh the third time and saith unto them, sleep on now and take your rest. It is enough. The hour is come. Behold, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise up in verse 42, let us go. Lo, he that betrayeth me is at hand. He's right where it has been prophesied that he would be. Verse 43, and immediately while he yet spake, cometh Judas, one of the 12, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves, from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. Verse 44, and he that betrayed him had given them a sign or a token, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he. Take him and lead him away safely. Verse 45. And as soon as he was come, he goeth straightway to Jesus and saith, Master, Master, and kissed him. And they laid their hands on him and took him. So they arrested Jesus, and they had clubs and all kinds of insults from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. So this is religion opposing Christianity. And there are a lot of details to be said about that. So they arrested Jesus in verse 46. Verse 47, and one of them that stood by drew a sword and smote a servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. So we know from the Gospel of John that this servant of the high priest's name was Malchus, and that it was Peter who drew the sword and smote off his ear. This is why it's important to read all the episodes in each Gospel. Verse 48, and Jesus answered and said unto them, are ye come out as against a thief with swords and with staves or clubs to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you took me not. but the scriptures must be fulfilled. So everything the Old Testament prophets spoke concerning his first coming and his earthly ministry had to be fulfilled. So Jesus is saying all the events that are taking place now have already been told by God to the prophets. Verse 50, and they all forsook him and fled. Jesus had told them in verse 27 that this would happen. Verse 51, and there followed him a certain young man having a linen cloth cast about his naked body, and the young men laid hold on him. Verse 52, and he left the linen cloth and fled from them naked. Now, Bible scholars and historians say this is probably Mark, who's called John Mark in the book of Acts, that this is described, these verses are describing. There's nothing said in the other Gospels about this particular incident. Verse 53, and they led Jesus away to the high priest, and with him were assembled all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes. And Peter followed him afar off, even into the place of the high priest, and he sat with the servants and warmed himself at the fire. So this is Peter following Jesus, but he's following afar off because he's getting ready. He doesn't know it, but he's going to fulfill what Jesus told him, that he would deny him twice before the clock crowed twice. He would deny him 3 times before the cock crew. So verse 55, and the chief priests and all the council sought for witness against Jesus to put him to death, and found none. So these religious leaders are trying to hire false witnesses, but when they did, they couldn't agree with each other. 56, for many bear false witness against him, but their witness agreed not together. And there arose certain and bare false witnesses against him, saying, these witnesses are going to try to say what Jesus had said, but they're misunderstood about what they're saying. They say in verse 58, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands. Jesus didn't say that. He said, destroy this temple, and I will raise it up in 3 days. And this spake he about the death that he would die. And so they say, he said, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. They added and subtracted words from what Jesus said, but neither so did their witness agree together. Verse 60, and the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, saying, answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witness against thee? Verse 61, but he held his peace and answered nothing. Again the high priest asked him and said unto him, art thou the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? Verse 62, and Jesus says, I am, and ye shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. So you'll see me at my second coming. 63. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, what need we any further witnesses? Ye have heard the blasphemy. what think ye? And they all condemned him to be guilty of death. Verse 65. And some began, and just think about what these verses are saying. And some began to spit on him, and to cover his face or blindfold him, and to buffet him or hit him with the fist, and to say unto him, Prophesy. And the servants did strike him with the palms of their hands. No respect, great insult that Jesus suffered on our behalf. And now comes Peter's denials. Verse 66. And as Peter was beneath in the palace, there cometh one of the maids of the high priest. Verse 67. And when she saw Peter warming himself, she looked upon him and said, And thou, or you also, was with Jesus of Nazareth. Verse 68. But he denied, saying, I know not, neither understand I what thou sayest. And he went out into the porch or the courtyard, and the cock crow. So that was the first cock crowing. Verse 69. And a maid saw him again, and began to say to them that stood by, This is one of them. Verse 70. And he denied it again. And a little after, they that stood by said again to Peter, Surely thou art one of them, for thou art a Galilean, and thy speech agreeth thereto. Your language betrays you. The way you speak betrays you, Peter. Verse 71. But he began to curse and swear, saying, I know not this man of whom ye speak. Verse 72. And the second time the cock crew. So Jesus says, before the cock crow, you shall not deny me 3 times. So he denied him 3 times. And at that third time, the cock crew. And when Peter called to mind the word that Jesus said unto him, Before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. And when he thought thereon, he wept. And in Luke, it'll say he wept bitterly. So he had a broken and contrite spirit because of what he had done in denying that he knew Jesus. So the narrative is going to continue in chapter 15, and we'll begin to see how Jesus paid such a tremendous price on our behalf. He had no sin. And the debt that we owed, he paid it all. So Jesus paid it all, and all to him we owe. So thank you all for listening. Continue to pray for us, and we're praying for y'all. And you all have a blessed day and a blessed week. Bye.